Hi everyone, I'm Michael. Welcome to today's class. If you were the leader of a country, what would be your ultimate goal? Would you aim to be the ruler of the richest country, the most powerful, or would you strive to have the happiest citizens? This question has been considered by many powerful leaders throughout history. In 2012, the United Nations researched and published the first World Happiness Report, a survey ranking 155 countries by their happiness level. As a result, governments are guided towards improving the living conditions for their citizens through a global competition. So, which country is ranked the happiest in the world now? Are people happier now than before? How is happiness measured? Let's take a look. We are going to talk about two things in today's lesson. Part 1 will discuss the World Happiness Report. Part 2 will pay attention to subjective well-being. For curiosity's sake, let's look at which countries are the happiest in 2017, according to the World Happiness Report. The winner is Norway, followed by Denmark. Both of these countries are in Scandinavia. The third and fourth happiest countries are Iceland and Switzerland. How did the survey come up with these winners? What makes people in these countries so happy? To find the answers, let's discover how the report measures happiness. There are 6 key factors. GDP per capita, healthy years of life expectancy, social support, public trust, freedom to make life decisions, and generosity. Let's briefly examine each of these factors. The first measure of happiness is GDP per capita. Although a common saying is that money can't buy happiness, it doesn't make you sad either. Before the World Happiness Report was created, countries used GDP as the sole measure of success. This leads to countries having a high wealth gap and poor living conditions for the majority of citizens. In our course, we see an example of GDP per capita. You can find this information by checking a country's GDP per capita. GDP is the total amount of goods and services produced in a country in 1 year. It is a measure of the strength of a country's economy. Per capita is Latin for per head. Therefore, per capita means per person. So, GDP per capita is the GDP divided by the country's population. For example, China is the world's second largest economy, but China ranks 71st in the world's GDP per capita list in 2016. Since China has a large population, its large GDP is divided by a high number of people to make a lower GDP per capita. The second factor is healthy years of life expectancy. This is similar to life expectancy, which is the average lifespan of a citizen born in a country. Healthy years of life expectancy is the amount of years someone can expect to live without experiencing disease or disability. Not being able to walk is an example of a disability. These first two factors, GDP per capita and healthy life expectancy, are both goals that have been used for many years to measure a country's development. While they do not measure social welfare, they have a big impact on the day-to-day life of normal citizens. The third factor is social support. This is how much a person is cared for and whether assistance from other people is available if needed. The survey question used to measure social support is, if you were in trouble, do you have relatives or friends you can count on to help you whenever you need them or not? Generally, people will feel a sense of well-being if they know someone is there when they need help. When people are forced to move to a new city for work, they are less likely to have someone to rely on for help. The fourth factor is public trust. This refers to whether or not people trust their government and businesses to be honest. It is measured by two survey questions. Is corruption widespread throughout the government or not? And is corruption widespread within businesses or not? Trust is an important part of economic efficiency. When businesses trust each other, it helps them deal with issues that legal contracts don't cover. It also helps consumers to feel that businesses will be reliable and honest. Furthermore, trust is also important between citizens and their government. When the leaders are trusted, people will be satisfied with the decisions that their government makes. People are also more likely to feel that the government is looking out for the people's best interests. Overall, trust gives people a sense of security and belonging in society. The fifth factor is the freedom to make life decisions. This question relates to whether or not a person feels they have the opportunity to do what they want. It is measured by the question, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with your freedom to choose what you do with your life? This question partly refers to the availability and affordability of education. It also includes personal rights and freedoms, such as the freedom to choose a religion and the freedom to choose what clothes to wear in public. The sixth and final factor is generosity. In this case, generosity refers to the amount of people who donate to charity. On the survey, it is measured by the question, have you donated money to a charity in the past month? People who donate to charity are happier on average because they feel they are making a positive impact on the world. These last four factors, social support, freedom to make life choices, generosity, and trust in government and businesses, are measures of social well-being. This is how well people feel they belong and are taken care of in a society. So, why is Norway the happiest country in the world? One thing about Norway that many people are not aware of is that they have a huge supply of oil and a low population. This makes their GDP per capita very high. The Norwegian people trust the government to invest their oil profits in long-term investments rather than spending the money quickly. This allows the country to consistently spend money on high-quality social welfare, education, and healthcare for all Norwegian citizens. Norwegian people are famous for being stress-free and for their tendency to avoid personal conflict. They have a strong education system, and are passionate about reading. In Norway, everyone is considered equal, and people with different levels of wealth are not strictly divided into different classes. In general, people are not very concerned with social status. To compare Norway with another oil-rich nation, Saudi Arabia produces the most oil in the world, yet it ranks much lower on the happiness scale. There are many reasons for this worth looking at. First, the population of Saudi Arabia is much higher, making GDP per capita to be lower. Almost a third of Saudi Arabia's population are migrant workers who are usually treated as second-class citizens. Many of these migrant workers experience very harsh working and living conditions. Meanwhile, much of the oil profits are kept by the many members of the royal house of Saud, who live a very luxurious lifestyle. Also, Saudi Arabia is famous for its very poor treatment of women and homosexual people. It is illegal for women to dress for beauty or leave the house without a man's supervision. Until very recently, it was illegal for women to drive a vehicle. Also, it's illegal to be homosexual in Saudi Arabia, punishable by death. That's all for part 1. Now let's move on to part 2. While the ranking of the World Happiness Survey is a good way to motivate governments, it doesn't tell the whole story. The rankings seem to indicate that everyone in the entire country is at the same level of happiness. However, there are unhappy people living in the most happy countries, and happy people living in the lowest ranked countries. A more detailed way to analyze happiness at the individual level is by using subjective well-being. This is how people evaluate their own level of happiness and satisfaction with their life. It is determined by how often positive events happen compared to negative events. Someone with a high level of subjective well-being would consider themselves very happy. When researching subjective well-being, we only study adults. Adults are more aware of their situation and are more emotionally stable than children or teenagers. An adult's happiness mainly depends on their economic situation, social situation, and personal health. Let's break down these 3 conditions further. Economic situation is their income level, education level, and employment status. Income is the amount of money earned per household. Education is determined by how many years they have spent in school. Employment status is whether or not they have a job. It's easy for one to compare their economic situation with others. Happiness can be impacted by our economic condition relative to those around us. The common saying, "keeping up with the Joneses," is a reference to how it can be difficult to keep up financially with your neighbors. For example, a moderately rich person may feel happier living in an average neighborhood than an extremely rich neighborhood. The next condition is social situation. This is determined by whether or not one is married, soon to be married, divorced, or has never married. This is a simple yet important influence on subjective well-being. Mental health is difficult to identify, since the social acceptance of someone having a mental illness varies between different cultures. Personal health can be determined by asking if the individual has ever been diagnosed for depression or an anxiety disorder. However, it can be difficult to tell if the person taking the survey is telling the truth. Over 150 countries were studied in the 2017 World Happiness Report, yet the Subjective Well-Being Survey only included 4 countries: the USA, Australia, Britain, and Indonesia. In the USA, Australia, and Britain, mental health was found to be more important than income, employment, or physical illness. In Indonesia as well, mental health is important, but less important than income. Having a partner is also a very important factor in the 3 Western countries, while in Indonesia it is not very important. Perhaps this finding shows the greater importance of the extended family in Indonesian culture. Education has a positive effect in all countries except Australia, but it is not considered an important condition. In all 4 countries, income is more important than education. Another section of the 2017 World Happiness Report also uncovered a shocking discovery. China's GDP per person is 5 times larger now than in 1990, but Chinese people are less happy now than they were then. This finding is very unusual, partly because a country multiplying its GDP per capita by 5 in 25 years is completely unheard of. Since GDP per capita is one of the most influential factors of happiness, researchers would expect the happiness level to greatly increase as a result. To look closer at what happened, the happiness level sharply declined from 1990 to 2000. However, between 2000 and 2017, it has recovered to a level very close to what it was in 1990. If this trend continues, the happiness level should continue to increase and reach a new record high in the near future. However, the question remains, why did happiness go down when GDP per capita went up? Why were people happier when there was less money? While it is difficult to find the exact reasons, we can look at some possible factors that may have decreased happiness. In 1990, when happiness peaked, most Chinese workers had iron rice bowl jobs. These jobs provided healthcare, housing, and job security, so workers were confident in their future. Most urban employees worked for public corporations, which was considered a lifetime job with good benefits. Unfortunately, in the 1990s, unemployment greatly increased, leading to the end of iron rice bowl jobs with benefits. This caused people to have new concerns about finding jobs, taking care of their family, and paying for health care. Another reason why happiness would decrease while GDP per capita increases is income inequality. GDP per capita is the average wealth per person, but it does not show how wealth is really shared among the population. Our course explains income inequality by using examples. In some countries, much of the wealth is concentrated in just a few people. For example, in the US, just 5% of the population had more than 70% of the wealth. In China, in 2014, the estimated share of the top 10% was 64%, but this number is rising. As we can see, GDP per capita doesn't tell the whole story. This is a good example of why the Global Happiness Survey is a useful measure of a country's success. Let's continue looking for more possible factors for China's increased GDP per capita and lower level of happiness. Another influence could be a change in housing prices. A higher GDP per capita usually causes housing prices to go up, which has been true in China since the 2000s. Housing prices are a complicated issue between homeowners and home buyers. When housing prices go up, home buyers suffer due to the higher cost of buying a home. They are forced to take out larger loans to pay for a suitable home, which can be stressful and reduce disposable income. Furthermore, when housing prices go up, wealthier people move in, and the overall cost of living rises to satisfy the tastes of wealthy individuals. The price of rent for local shops goes up, making it difficult to stay in business. However, homeowners want housing prices to increase. This brings them more wealth for retirement and more to give their children. Therefore, homeowners are happy when housing prices rise. A common reason for housing prices to go up is a limited supply of land available. Property developers may make more profit from building luxury apartments rather than basic units. Low-paid workers are forced to live further away from big cities to find more affordable areas. This leads to longer hours commuting to work every day. Long commute times lowers the individual's level of happiness because they trade free time for time spent traveling to and from work. This means that governments should put a high priority on making public transportation as efficient as possible to reduce commuting times. Okay, that's it for today. Let's have a quick review. In the first part, we looked at the World Happiness Report, in which we learned how the report measures happiness, and why Norway is the happiest country in the world. Countries around the world can use this knowledge to work on improving the well-being of their citizens. In the second part, we introduced three main factors that determine subjective well-being, including economic situation, social situation, and personal health. We also discussed why people in China are less happier than 25 years ago with increased GDP per capita. As individuals, we don't need to focus only on our own happiness. we can aim to serve a higher purpose instead. This may be our family, our country, or perhaps we should aim to serve the entire human race. Perhaps we should all think of things we can do to help improve the lives of other people in the world. That's all for today's lesson. See you next time.